Well, this summer we're forming our worship series around the questions that you have sent us, and we had enough already to plan out all the way through August. You've got good questions. What we tried to do in this series was formulate them. As you might imagine, they were a wild variety of inquiries about faith, life, this church, and so we tried to organize them into themes, basically picking out the ones that were most commonly asked first. And one of the most common questions that your ministers received for this summer series was, what is God? Or what is God to a Unitarian Universalist church or minister, but all in that theme. And so we thought we'd knock out the easy ones right at the beginning of the summer. This is very clear. We'll get through it quickly, and we'll be done, and we don't have to revisit it. So this is one of those ones where you disappoint everybody. Just prepare for that, please. In our context here in this congregation, we hold some values in common. We affirm that whatever we name as holy is bigger than one person's experience, that all human beings are worthy of love and justice without exception, that whatever religion is, it's not about what happens after you die, but how you live well on earth, that building heaven on earth is a big piece of what we do. We take seriously the Christian and Jewish scriptures and tradition that led us to where we are, but we do not take them literally. We've affirmed that the best ways of living typically come out of relational acts of love and justice. This is all what we share in common here. And we have a wide variety of opinions, experiences, beliefs, preferences, and so on when it comes to faith, life, and experiences of God. I guarantee you there are people in the room who are like, oh boy, they're talking about God. People who didn't come because it was on the website. People who are saying, oh good, they're finally talking about God. Other people who say, this church is way too Christian, and others who say, well, it's not Christian enough. It's too formal. It's not formal enough. We hear that feedback all the time. And as long as I'm getting that feedback in generally equal measure, I take it that we're doing a pretty good job. Challenging everyone and comforting everyone, hopefully in equal measure. As long as nobody gets what they want, we're doing great. What that means is that I'm treading on interesting territory in the room. And so I hope that you will be willing to go with me a little bit today, and that you will suspend for a moment the idea that when we talk about God, we have to talk about belief. One of the default questions we go to in exploring theology, God, spiritual depth, and wisdom is one of the worst, most just unhelpful questions you could ask. Do you believe in God? What does that question do? That question, the default question for most of us, is one of the least helpful approaches to open the door because from the very beginning it sets up a duality. Yes or no. We have taken the infinite forces of the universe itself, which twirl stars and galaxies, beat our hearts, move the tides of the ocean, that which is beyond all comprehension and explanation, and put it to a checkbox, yes or no. It's a bad question, but we ask it all the time. And a lot of us feel very proud of the answer that we come to. And then we know who is wrong. They who checked the other box. And in our church, they might even be in our church. It sets up a right and wrong about a thing that you really can't be right and wrong about. A yes or no about a thing that really doesn't work with yes and no's. And it's a control issue. See, when we ask that question, all of a sudden I get to know where you stand and whether I like it. I also get to control how I categorize you, and I get to control God. Because if it's a belief issue, then I am able to say that within the small, tiny gray matter of this human brain, I can contain the vast, infinite mysteries of the universe. And then go, take it or leave it. What? But that's often how we start a conversation about God. So if you're willing, for the next few minutes, please set aside the idea that we're talking about something that you either believe in or you don't. The label theist, atheist, pantheist, panentheist, deist, Buddhist-leaning, humanist, Jewish, Unitarian, Universalist. All of those labels, they're just not going to add up to what we're really trying to do. Anytime we're talking about something sacred, holy, profound, anything that is worthy of that little tiny, insufficient word God, anything that we're referring to in that, it's all translation. Whether you grew up in the same church, you speak the same language, you're in the same family, anytime you start relating to another person about the mystery of God, you're doing it in translation. Because no two people experience reality in the same way or are able to communicate it in a way that works. And here's what happens. We forget that we are all doing translation, and then we get really puffed up about either fighting or accepting a literal version of what we think is or is not that person's meaning. Let's take, for example, the word Lord as God. This is a notion that progressives love to get mad about. God is Lord. Because when we do, it asserts that we don't have no Lord. We are equal. We do not like hierarchical structures of power, and anyone who has ever put the name Lord to God obviously wants to control me, thank you very much, and I am not controlled. How dare they? And our mind goes boom, 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 boom. The word Lord was never originally in the Bible. It's an English word used to replace Latin that was used to translate Hebrew by some people who didn't speak Hebrew sometimes. Every time the word Lord is in the Bible, it's actually a replacement for the proper name of the Iron Age tribal god of the Hebrews, Yahweh. Except in ancient Hebrew, we didn't have marks on how to pronounce it, and saying a god's name was either dangerous or a controlling thing, and so you didn't do that. So the people who translated those texts, instead of putting down the name Yahweh, put Lord. They did that because they were English in a feudal and later royal caste system. Now the name Yahweh is just a name, a proper name. It's that God's name. When Moses meets that God in the Hebrew Scriptures, he sees the burning bush and says, wow, that's amazing. He hears this voice, Moses, Moses. He walks up to it. It gives him instructions about how to engage the oppressive Egyptian empire. And he says, well, I'm not going to do that unless I know your name. Knowing a God's name and saying it gave you control in that Iron Age mindset. And so this God very smartly goes, I'm not telling you my name. The first response that this God has is, I am what I am. I am what I am. Leave it alone. The translation is also, I am that which has been, or I will be what I will be, or I am what exists. And then pressed a little further, it says, tell them Yahweh sent you. Tell them Yahweh, the God of your ancestors, sent you, and go up and tell them that you want to go into the wilderness to sacrifice 3 days to Yahweh. I want to make the point clear by offering you another name to insert, so that anytime you see Lord, remember we're talking a proper name. Let's choose Tracy. And we'll just insert that for Yahweh. You shall say to the Israelites, I am has sent you. Tell the Israelites, Tracy, the God of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, has sent me to you. Go assemble the elders and tell them that Tracy, the God of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, has appeared. Go to the king of Egypt and say to him, Tracy, the God of the Hebrews has met with us. We need to go into the wilderness for 3 days so that we may sacrifice to Tracy, our God. See how different that sounds? But we're dealing in translation. Every time you've ever read a scripture that you liked or didn't like, a homily that you liked or didn't like, a book that you liked or didn't like, you're dealing with a translation of a translation of a translation of a mistranslation of a bad copy of a translation of a game of telephone that's been going on for thousands of years. We have little clue what's going on, and yet we have strong opinions about it. These notions change over time. They're not static. It's one of the reasons why I wish that we Unitarian Universalists read the comprehensive text of the biblical canon, because you watch this group of people over the course of around 2,000 years just struggle and change their minds, and God looks a little different, first demanding sacrifice and then not wanting sacrifice, first being a tribal God and then a God of all people, an uncontrollable one, a controllable one, a one beyond all comprehension. There is not one static version in any book, any tradition, any text, any person. Humility, humility, humility. When we're talking about God, every single tool we have will fall short. Every experience, every measurement system, every language, every ritual, none of it is sufficient. One of my favorite physicists is this guy named Brian Greene. Some of you have read his work. He tells of a scenario which will likely happen in the future. So get this. We now know that the universe is expanding faster all the time. We used to think that it was slowing down. But now we know that it actually expands more rapidly and more rapidly. I promise we're going to go somewhere with this. What happens is it eventually, all things in the universe will expand faster than the speed of light, which means that the light you need to see them will not be able to catch up with its movement. So if there are still humans around on this planet by the time that that has happened, with their best telescopes and best reason and every solid measurement tool they have, they will look up into the sky and rightly come to the conclusion that we are alone, that there are no other galaxies, that we are alone on a rock in inky black darkness. And they will be right to come to that conclusion, because they will literally be unable to see what is real. It will have been gone. They will look back at ancient science books in the way that we look at ancient mythology and scripture and say, these people talked about seeing these things. They were obviously wrong. What don't we see? What can't we see that is real? Now, I'm not saying that I want people to believe something by faith that people used to think thousands of years ago. I really hope that you know that's not what I'm saying. We are not talking about the mostly male, mostly white, judgmental old guy in the sky who treats you like Santa. And if you've been around more than about 15 seconds in this church, I really hope you know that that is not what we're talking about. What I am suggesting is that every word you've ever spoken about God, whether you like it or not, every prayer you've ever uttered, every ritual you've ever been to, every tradition you've either entered or left, doesn't come close. Every tool we have to experience the mystery, and every tool we have to communicate our experience of the mystery will fall short. Our best is not enough. So a good question at this point might be, if we're always talking in translation about a moving target that evolves over time and cannot be understood or communicated by finite humans, why do we keep talking about it? Why are you using that word? Me, you ask? Thank you. I continue to use that necessary but insufficient language because all meaningful relationships in my life are communicated by insufficient but necessary language. Take my children, for example. I know people in the church who say, well, God doesn't mean what other people think it means for me, and so we should stop using the language. I get it. But let's try this in another relationship. I say the words, I love you, to my child. Those words are insufficient for what I feel. I love you? That's just English. What I mean to say is that through you, I've witnessed the mystery of continuing evolutionary evolving. I have watched the flesh of my flesh consciously grow up before me in independent and mysterious ways. I feel a kinship with the matter that I name you that I have not felt with any other piece of existence. And if you die before I do, something deep will rip apart in my very being. But I say I love you. And I've never said, because I love you is insufficient, kid, sorry, I'm not going to tell you. Friend, my friend. I have people who know the intimate secrets of my life and still love me. People who probably would give up their own life for me. That word friend doesn't even cut it. But I wouldn't say, well, yeah, that's my friend Mara, but you wouldn't get it, so she's not my friend. It just doesn't work that way. All language is insufficient and necessary to form meaningful relationships. I'm not suggesting that using the word God or not using the word God is better or worse for you. Anything that's a dualism that you can check a box on, just throw that away. We only have a couple more minutes. You can pick it up right when you leave. What I'm suggesting is that you measure those tools by whether or not they help you cultivate a profound and meaningful relationship with existence itself. Are you discarding that word or that tradition or that idea? And does discarding it help you form a profound and mysterious, meaningful relationship with all of life and all creation? Great. But so many of us think that because we took off the bad pair of glasses that Christine read to us about, that bad pair of glasses, that vengeful, spiteful, old white guy God in the sky is a bad pair of glasses. But so many of us took them off and thought that that meant we could see. We have to find a new pair of glasses, a lens and language and performative ritual through which we develop a meaningful, personal relationship with all that is, and then see that reality infused in our everyday living, to the point where the person sitting in front of us becomes a miracle. The beating of our hearts is a sacrament. The growing grass and the falling rain are evidence of a vast and mysterious power beyond all comprehension, which has always been and moves in you. Call it God or don't. Forming into that relationship is what we're about. I call the moments of my life of extreme connection and relationship God moments. I had one of them here in this congregation last year. I woke up at my house from a dream, a very bad dream, a nightmare that made me jump up and scream. I was sweating. It was the kind of one where you can't move. And I shot up in the bed, and I turned to my wife, who was wondering what was wrong, and told her I couldn't shake this feeling of this dream. I was going to die of blood cancer. It was so profoundly tangible. I knew it. And within 24 hours, I got a call from a member of our congregation, Doe Allen, to tell me that she was going to die of blood cancer. Is that experience true? I have no idea. I have no idea. I don't know what it means. I don't know if it's mere coincidence. I don't know if she and I were tapped into some cosmic New Age communication line. I know that I now think half of you think I'm weird. And so that's part of my fear in telling you about it, but I'm just going to take the risk. It's one of the most transformative moments of my life. Because in that moment of pain, I felt so incredibly connected to her and to all people. It wasn't a thing I believed or not. It was an experience where it was like someone had wiped away a dirty window and I could see everything became saturated and infused with meaning. Life was an adventure. I was looking around the corner for the next thing to see, what is the meaning in this? That level of intensity only lasted a couple of days. I carry a little of it with me now, and I've been trying to find that feeling again since that, even though it came out of pain. When I was talking to her wife, Lou, about that this week and asking her permission to share that story, she asked me, well, is that God? I don't know. My guess is any experience I've ever had, just like my language, is insufficient. I hope that in this place, the language, the tools, the community, the ritual, all we're doing doesn't set you up for a yes or no question. I hope that we are not setting you up to reject or accept a really tiny God. I hope that you do not settle for rejecting a small God or accepting a small one, but rather you feel invited into a mysterious relationship with all that is. I hope that when we use that language or not, and it doesn't matter, that this place helps you feel like you are so incredibly at home in your body, on this tiny rock floating through space, in this church, in all that is. May it be so, today and all days, and amen.